Hi,
Hey, nice to see you.
likewise. Can you tell us a few words about you and about the tool you're going to show us?
Yeah, sure. I'm Brian Leonard, previously the technical co-founder at TaskRabbit. While I was there, I was in charge of the data, product, and engineering teams, and we saw a lot of need to integrate data into the tools that people were using, especially the marketing team and the customer support team and the sales team as well. And so to solve that pain in open source fashion, we created Grouparoo, a way to sync your data from your data warehouse into the tools that you need to drive with that data, making everybody much happier in the process.
It's called Reverse ETL, right? Am I
Reverse
correct?
ETL, yes, it's putting data into your database. Your data warehouse would be what has historically been called ETL. And so now we want to take it out, which is somewhat new, and operationalize that data. And people are calling it reverse ETL.
Okay, cool. So do you have a demo for us?
Yes, sure. Happy to show you. Share my screen. All right. So in Grouparoo, what you do is you create records. You attach it to sources, and the end goal is to send it to destinations. So you can have one or more destinations. We connect to MailChimp like I have here, and Salesforce and HubSpot and Facebook ads and all kinds of things like that. The end goal is to say who you want to sync or which records you want to sync. In this case, we'll sync all of the records in our users model. That would be your whole data warehouse full of customers maybe. And you do these mappings. So you set up mapping your email to the required variables that MailChimp needs. We'll also send over our first name and last name. We could also populate their LTV, lifetime value if we wanted. It also allows us to tag the users in MailChimp or create lists in Marketo or a variety of other things based on these group memberships. Either way, we can save that data. And now my empty MailChimp instance here will shortly fill up with my 1,000 users that I have in the system. What that looks like is that we make sure that we got all the data. We're calculating all of those records. Okay, great, good to go there. Then we'll make a bunch of what we call exports to that system, and it'll send it over to MailChimp. The interesting thing here isn't a button to sync to MailChimp. It's closer to now we've defined what our data pipeline is. And every time the user buys something or changes their first name or gets a new email address or whatever it is, then it will automatically update that in MailChimp. What we're seeing is that sales teams, marketing teams, they're using this to communicate with their customers much better. Let me refresh this here. All right, cool. So now all of those exports are happening to MailChimp. And then shortly, we'll start to see, some people over here, and now that's filling up with the tags as I specified, and we can use those. And so maybe somebody newly buys something, Grouparoo notices. Now they have a new lifetime value that's higher than 100. It newly tags them as high value. Oh, looks like this person just got over 100. Great. And then it can trigger a campaign to them.
Okay, cool. And how does the data, where the data lives now? So I guess for you, it's maybe PostgreSQL on your computer, right?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, how did all of this happen, right? We set up sources. So we have a few models that I have set up here in my demo. And these are the shape of the data. And so this one is the users. We could also connect to our companies that we know about, or even started talking with people about syncing like locations of their retail environments, or the retail stores and things like that. In this case, I'm connected to users and connected to Postgres, basically pointed at that table and most critically saying what the primary key is here, which then allows us to connect to that and have unique records pulling in all of these columns. We see some people using Grouparoo at the end of a data pipeline where they've already transformed their data into a single table that's kind of really wide. And, we're just connecting to that one table and then syncing it to one or more places. In other cases, people don't quite have that transformation game down yet. And we can connect to other tables as well. In this case, purchases table, for example, and like kind of doing that join. So now here we're pulling in that LTV that I talked about, where we're connecting to the price and summing it up, and only in certain cases. So kind of like a SQL builder. You could use SQL as well, but this makes it a little more accessible for people that aren't writing SQL. Instead of Postgres, we could connect to Snowflake or BigQuery, Redshift, Mongo, even a variety of different sources.
Yeah, I see that you're running this on localhost. How difficult it is to actually do this?
Yeah, the interesting thing about development locally on localhost is that all of this stuff can get saved as config files in a project, which you can then deploy. We found a lot of people want to go through that developer-based workflow where they check things into Git and have tests and pull requests and all of that. And so you can do it on localhost, or you can allow Grouparoo.com will host it for you. In which case you can point and click and make all of that happen. Soon to be able to deploy your config as well. Or you can self-host. It's a node-based project, relatively straightforward. We have a one-click button to Heroku. People do a variety of stuff in their own self-hosting environments. We also have a Docker container, so it's fairly easy to get out there.
Do you maybe have an example? How can people run it with Docker? It must be on your README, right?
Yes, of course. So if we go to Grouparoo.com docs, getting started here, nice little video. Here's a Docker Compose situation, and this is a link to GitHub with that container and definition and whatnot. Yeah, that's how it works.
So basically you do Docker Compose up, and then you have this thing running on your computer, and then you go to localhost, you configure whatever system you need. In this case, it was MailChimp, and that's it, right?
Yeah, that's it. It doesn't have to be complicated. The trick to some degree is defining your data model. That's what's different for everybody else. But once, now that we've standardized that, and particularly adapted to all of these different sources and destinations, this is a huge leg up on any kind of integration you want to do. Before it was 6 weeks or so to get something like this running, and now it's a day or less.
Yeah,
all the way down to, I'm very practiced. I'm at about 10 minutes for a new client, but it's a big step forward to have all of these connections written for you, and a syncing system that's clearly so much better than CSVs or even cron jobs is what we've seen people upgrading from.
Do you want to show anything else before I ask you questions?
Yeah, just to finish how we got to that demo, maybe the last piece was, so we defined our sources, which then created a bunch of these records. So here's Gilberta here, and they, these are the things we know about them. We see this, even, just the developers running this, we've seen this be helpful in talking, say, with our marketing people to say that these profiles look great. One of the issues with data engineers integrating with, these systems they don't know much about. They don't really always know if the data is good. So we've seen this helping organizational friction reduction. And then the last part I showed was the groups. And so, we can tag people and create lists and all sorts of, and share definitions between tools, like these high value users with a recent automotive purchase. Maybe that's a tag you want in Zendesk, and it's a marketing campaign the marketing team is doing. And so in some cases, we see engineers doing this all themselves according to the spec. And others, we've seen engineers bring in the data, but then allow the marketing team to define these numbers themselves and or more or less have autonomy in how they integrate with these tools. And we've seen that be really effective for velocity on both sides of that organization. So kind of pick your own adventure, all the way from code config in Git and no code over here, and then somewhat commonly somewhere in the middle that whatever facilitates the best working with your business teams.
Cool. So what kind of destinations you have out of the box?
Right now we have 20 or so, maybe more now, integrations. The most common ones are the marketing ones, things like Marketo, MailChimp, the sales ones, somewhat like Salesforce, HubSpot, and others, and the support ones, things like, and general communication maybe, things like Zendesk and Intercom.
Okay, if somebody wanted to use it for, I don't know, some other email marketing service, I don't know, review or something else, you don't have integration for that. And if somebody wants to develop this, how difficult that would be?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting things about open source, for sure, is that if we were a SaaS-based only, tool, there's so many possible destinations that they're just so far down the list they will never happen. And so there's like very esoteric and or even internal tools, but there's also a whole world of tools like the MailChimp of Brazil or the HubSpot of Vietnam. And so we've been talking with people about developing those, and I'm just super excited about how to do that. It's relatively easy. If we look at the documentation around development, where'd you go? Development, destinations here. In the end, you basically implement a method called export record or records batch. And it's like, given these connection details that the user filled in, I really want to sync this data to this thing. Here's the old data, here's the new data, because sometimes it's interesting to know what changed, and it sends it over there. We definitely see integrations. We've done integrations in days, most commonly within a week. It's relatively straightforward. So we're also, we have our roadmap public here. If anyone wants to upvote some of the destinations, we're also helping people make them so they can get started.
Cool. And do you need to use any specific language, or like I saw you use Node? Like, do you have to write these plugins in JavaScript, or you can also do this in Python or something else?
Yeah, so all of the integrations are in TypeScript, Node basically. We found that a lot of data people are definitely in Python, but the world of people that are integrating with stuff, that turned out to be the most approachable language. That's the one we went with.
Okay, interesting. So how many people are working on it?
I'll stop my demo switch. How many people are working? We have 8 people on our team right now.
8 people. And I think you shared some of you shared the dashboard with your plans, the board. But what specifically you want to do, let's say, in the next quarter?
Yeah, the release that we have coming up in just a few days, probably by the time this is up, is our V07 release. And that's laying the groundwork for the thing that we've seen. So we started basically with all of these records were like people, basically. And we just had this notion of profiles, and, you know, that's pretty common because marketing and sales, and they're all kind of contact and human based. But a lot of the requests we were getting were outside of that space for companies and, like I said, locations and events and all kinds of other stuff. And so the current sort of new kind of work that we're doing is around broadening that up to new kinds of models and destinations. And so that's coming up now. We're also doing integrations with many more systems. That's the near term for us.
So is there going to be integration with Eventbrite?
Yeah,
No?
I mean, there's no reason
Eventually.
there's no reason we wouldn't. You know, it's all about, to some degree, we're letting customers and not even people paying us, users, drive the roadmap. And haven't heard that one yet, but if there's an API to you know, essentially say this person is attending this meeting or whatever it is, then it's
Yeah, that's something
super
we
easy.
use at Data Talks Club to organize events, Eventbrite. So we use meetup.com and this Eventbrite, the other
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen some really interesting conversations, like people start using it for their marketing list, and then I just got an email from someone that's using it for that, and they like intercepted this other project across the company that was about to build their own custom synchronization engine and then do an adapter so they can sync it to multiple places. And now, you know, now we're helping them write the code necessary to sync to those somewhat weird things. It's kind of great.
Yeah. What's the most interesting insight you got from the users of your tool?
I think the most interesting thing that we see is, I don't know, maybe get it, sort of understanding it, how easy it can be to incrementally add. I think you look at this as a data engineer and you see, so you did a query and then you uploaded it to MailChimp, like big deal, right? Like I can do a query in 3 seconds and then I can take that CSV or whatever it is and then upload it into MailChimp. But then, okay, fine. You want it automated? Great. I'll make some cron job or something and it'll be fine. But everyone that heads down that path eventually gets into, like, we just, one of the features in our new release is all about invalid data. So the emails don't match or this or that, and like data quality and all of this stuff. And all of a sudden that breaks your CSVs and cron jobs. And there's rate limiting, and there's now sharing that across multiple services and all of these things. And so I think the most exciting thing I see is when companies get it, like we talked about, and they're using this to have a true single source of truth, their warehouse, and then sort of Grouparoo's interpretation of that, so that high value means the same in all of these systems and customers have, you know, much better experiences.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks. How can people contribute?
Yeah, so on our GitHub, you know, right now we're in the middle of Hacktoberfest. So we're participating in that. If you go to grouparoo.com/Hacktoberfest, in general, that'll lead you towards the 2 most common ways of contributing, which is, you know, documentation, essentially, low bar, like we wrote all this documentation, but we kind of know how it works also. And so, you know, help us there and get it started. And then contributing destinations. Grouparoo.com/chat, join our Slack. We're super happy to help. And just in general, use it and give us feedback. And we hope it works for you, and we're ready to put on our roadmap. You know, we're still in learning mode. So, you know, that validation and feedback is super critical.
What's this Hacktoberfest?
Hacktoberfest is a event run by DigitalOcean and others in October. And it's generally about contributing to open source code. And so there's a way to basically, encourages that contribution. And if you want a free t-shirt, there's a way to get a t-shirt. You do for pull requests and things like that. And so that we're in the middle of that, and happy to help you get a free t-shirt if you want.
Okay, that's interesting. So basically, like these companies, they organize the movement and they say, okay, now let's everyone work on open source, and whoever works on open source say, hey, you can come to our project and contribute here. That's cool.
Exactly. And then there's a bunch of events on their site. We have an event coming up, basically office hours for anyone that's wants to learn more or has started and wants to chat about it coming up.
Okay, so if somebody wants to contribute but not sure how to get started, so they can go to office hours and then ask about that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Or just email hello@Grouparoo, small group, open source advocates, super happy to help you get going.
Okay, cool. Do you have any advice for anyone who's watching it?
It's such a broad
It can
question.
be anything. Life advice, data advice.
Life advice. Get lots of sleep is critical, really. Data advice. I think my advice, sort of as a technical co-founder, as a CTO, as a dork in general, that I give is the first instinct I often had. I hear something and then I immediately want to like code it up or something like that. And, basically through my product leadership that I eventually came into in TaskRabbit and building this business, it's more like go a little deeper into the problem space before you start building. And so, we've talked to lots of people about Grouparoo, but I want to hear so much more. So feel free to give us advice. But the end result from a little bit more digging into that problem space, leads to better solutions. If you end up whatever you end up coding, or maybe you don't even end up coding. Like, that's not all. Lines of code isn't always the metric of success, for sure.
Like there are tools like Grouparoo that you can use and do a lot of stuff without coding, right?
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't an underhanded pitch or anything, but sure, like it's accomplishing the goal that's more important than the number of lines of code. And if something there to help you, I suppose you're right. That's great. Yes, that too.
And we as engineers tend to, jump into coding immediately without, first thinking about this and then actually making some research, doing some research and seeing what is out there already that is solving our problems, right?
Yeah, or just even learning more about the problem and realizing it's not exactly like you thought. It's so much fun to code that we jump right in, but then we get super grumpy if someone tells us we coded the wrong thing. So like even better to learn more about it to begin with.
Okay, thanks. I think that's it. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for demoing the tool, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Alexei. Nice to talk to you.